everybody, how's it going? If I've done what I told myself I would do earlier this week, this is the third video to go up this week. And that should keep all of you happy. Those of you who are like, hey, where's video? I thought you were going to do 32 this year. You've only done like 4 or 5, or where's the rest of them? So this week, the 1-year anniversary of moving to California has pretty much turned into a big complaint fest, and I promise you that's not exactly what I was after. Instead, I wanted to do this because California has this grand reputation of being one of the best places in the world to live and to visit and just to be. For crying out loud, it's called the Golden State. Whereas Nebraska in the Midwest is just kind of this weird forgotten place that nobody talks about and nobody cares about. And it's not uncommon for people to say, and not jokingly, that they thought that people in Nebraska still rode around in covered wagons. So after living in California for a year, I wanted to take some time to actually pay some kind of tribute to Nebraska because it's a pretty fantastic place. Honestly. That took me a long time to get around to say. When I first went there when I was in college, I thought, why in the world am I going to Nebraska? This place has nothing. And it does have many things instead. Probably the one thing that I didn't realize I loved about Nebraska, but I certainly realize it now, is that in Nebraska, specifically in Lincoln, because that's where I lived, you had a great sense of community. So I've been thinking a lot about community and what causes community, why Nebraska had it, and why California doesn't. And here's what I've come up with. First of all, pretty much every city or town in Nebraska is just one town or city. Once you go outside the boundaries of that city, you're in a cornfield. I would say that's a stereotype, but it's not too far from the truth. A town was a town, and a city was a city, and it was a single thing. Now, I live in an area called the Inland Empire, which is a gigantic sprawl of city that never ends. After a year of living here, I can't even keep track of how many cities there are here. I know the one I live in, I know the one I work in, I know where my kids go to school, because those are 3 different cities. But every time I talk to somebody about where something is, like, oh, well, you just have to go over to blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't know where that is. And they're like, oh, you don't know where blah, 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 blah is? And I'm like, who does? But part of what's really frustrating about having all these different cities is I don't know any of them. I don't know what's in any of them because I don't get to see it. One of the weirdest things about living in Southern California is how you have to travel. Everything is by freeway. Living in Lincoln, Nebraska, there is no freeway. Here, it's the way to travel. There's no other way to get around. So every single day I get up, I get on the freeway because I'm told not to say interstate. They're the same thing! So I get on the freeway from Colton, and I drive past probably, I don't know, 5, 6 different cities that I don't even know the names of, and I end up in Riverside. Riverside is big, it's sprawling, apparently there's a lot of stuff here, but you'd never know because my only experience is what I pass by on the freeway. I don't get to see any of the buildings. I don't get to know any of the local hotspots. It's just this weird channel that takes me from one place to another, and I don't get to see the beauty of any of it. Compare that to a place like Lincoln. Because there's no freeway, you have to get around on all these streets, and they can take you into some really bizarre and really amazing neighborhoods. Sheridan is one of my favorite streets in Lincoln. Gorgeous houses the whole way, and everybody knows about it because eventually someone's got to take that street. You can stumble upon new things in Lincoln, Nebraska. But here you don't really see any of that. You get on the freeway, you go, you get off, you get home. You don't find things automatically. Because there's so many different cities and because you take the freeway to get there, you have to really work to find any little community event that you want to attend. Here's the weird downside of all that though. Even if you found an event that you really liked, everybody else could be there too. It's almost too big and there's too many people. So if we wanted to go to a farmer's market, we would have to drive to the next city. But you know what? Everybody from every city has gone to that city. It's the single place where that event is happening, and it's not even your city, it's somebody else's. I mean, it's the same thing when I want to take my kids to something. We might hear about an event that's happening on the 4th of July that'd be great for families, but you show up there's going to be like 10,000 people because everybody from all the surrounding cities went to that one place. Because there are so many different cities, a lot of the cities themselves don't have a lot of anything. They rely on the neighboring city to have all the extra stuff. So there's a lot of these little tiny like amusement parks everywhere, but you have to drive to them. They're not your cities, they're somebody else's city, which means you don't care about it. It's not yours, it's just a place to go and a thing to do. You know, I've never really thought of Lincoln as being like a small little Nebraska town because it's not. But compared to out here, it is tiny. It's one little tiny thing that has edges, that has boundaries, that if you drive for half an hour, you'll probably be outside of it and driving into the middle of the nothingness of the Midwest, which is quite lovely, really, once you get used to it. But because it is one city, because it is one entity, Everything that happens in it gives you some sense of pride and some sense of belonging. You can go to Jazz in June on the university's campus, and there will be thousands of people there maybe, but it's all your concert. It's all your outing. You can go to Pioneers Park and have tons of people that all showed up on the same day, but that's your park and it's part of your experience because you live in that town. When you're stuck in traffic because you didn't realize it was game day because you don't really care about the Huskers and you accidentally went down into the Haymarket and traffic is everywhere and you can't move without running into red, it's still kind of cool because that's your town and your team that I still don't really care that much about. I mean, you can't even bond over sports here. I mean, we've got a lot of different sports teams that are close by, but, you know, there's too many to choose from. There's too many options. We have so many options that we don't have anything to come together and rejoice over. So when you're looking at things like California and Nebraska, I think pretty much everybody would agree you're not comparing apples to apples. I guess mostly what I'm looking at is California has been this wonderful place for so many people. And I guess in a sense, I'm trying to stand up for the little guy. Because Nebraska doesn't get a lot of play. It doesn't get a lot of attention. And maybe that's best. Maybe that's really what it is. The places you really want to call home are probably the places that people don't really know about.